The stage line from Omaha to Fort Kearny had stopped running 3 days earlier, which meant Tabitha Kennedy was traveling with a freight wagon driven by a man who talked endlessly about his hemorrhoids and chewed tobacco with such enthusiasm that brown spittle decorated his beard like grotesque ornaments. The Nebraska Territory stretched endlessly around them, rolling prairie grass bending under a December wind that cut through her wool traveling coat as though it were made of paper. She clutched her carpetbag tighter and tried not to think about how her father would react when she finally arrived at his trading post, 3 weeks late and considerably poorer than when she had left Boston. "Storm's coming," the driver announced, spitting a dark stream over the side of the wagon. "Can smell it." Tabitha looked at the sky, which had been a brilliant blue just an hour before. Now it resembled dirty pewter, heavy and low, pressing down on the prairie with ominous intent. "How far to Fort Kearny?" "Another 8 miles, maybe 10. Depends on whether the horses decide to cooperate." He scratched his beard, dislodging what might have been yesterday's breakfast. "But we ain't making it before that storm hits. Not a chance in hell, begging your pardon, miss. Perhaps we should turn back to the last way station." "That was 15 miles ago. We push forward or we die out here. Them's the choices." The wind picked up, and Tabitha noticed something odd about it. It had teeth now, sharp and cold, biting exposed skin with vicious precision. Within minutes, the first snowflakes appeared, innocent and delicate, drifting lazily from the darkening sky. Then more came and more, until the air itself seemed to transform into a solid white wall. The driver cursed creatively, pulling his hat lower. "This is bad. This is real bad." "Can you see the trail?" "What trail? Can't see my own damn horses." The wagon lurched forward through what had become a complete whiteout. Tabitha could hear the horses whinnying in distress, could feel the vehicle tilting dangerously as the wheels found ruts and holes invisible beneath the rapidly accumulating snow. Her fingers had gone numb despite her gloves, and her face felt raw where the wind-driven snow pelted it mercilessly. Then the wagon stopped moving entirely. "We're stuck," the driver shouted over the howling wind. "Wheels in a hole or adrift, can't tell which." "What do we do, you pray, miss? I'm going to try to free us before we freeze to death out here." He climbed down into the blizzard and disappeared into the white chaos. Tabitha waited, shivering, listening to his grunts and curses as he worked. Minutes passed, each one colder than the last. Her teeth chattered so hard she worried they might crack. She pulled her carpetbag close as though the few possessions inside might somehow generate warmth. A gunshot cracked through the storm. Tabitha's heart seized. "Hello, sir. Are you all right?" No answer came except the wind's demonic shrieking. She forced herself to move, climbing down from the wagon seat into snow that came up to her knees. "Sir, please answer me." The cold was astonishing, a physical force that seemed determined to stop her heart. She could barely see 2 feet in front of her face. She stumbled around the wagon, calling out, her voice swallowed by the storm. No sign of the driver. No sign of anything except white death in every direction. Then she heard hoofbeats. A massive shape materialized from the blizzard, a horse, dark as midnight, with a rider who seemed carved from the storm itself. He wore a heavy coat and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low, a bandana covering the lower half of his face. He looked like something from a nightmare or a dime novel, dangerous and otherworldly. "You alone?" His voice was deep, muffled by the bandana but audible over the wind. "The driver, he went to free the wagon. I heard a shot. He ran. Saw him heading east on foot about half a mile back. Won't make it far in this." The rider dismounted with fluid grace, landing beside her in the deep snow. Up close, she could see his eyes gray as winter sky, sharp and assessing. You'll freeze if you stay with this wagon. I cannot simply abandon, you'll die. He said it flatly, without drama. This storm's going to last through the night, maybe longer. Temperatures already dropping below zero. You have maybe an hour before frostbite takes your fingers and toes, maybe 2 before you just don't wake up. Your choice: come with me or stay here and become part of the landscape, come spring thaw. Tabitha had been raised to be cautious of strange men, especially strange men who appeared from blizzards like vengeful spirits. But she had also been raised to recognize truth when she heard it, and this man was telling her a simple, undeniable truth. Stay here and die, or go with him and possibly live. Where would we go? My ranch. 3 miles northwest. 3 miles in this. I can make it blindfolded. Grew up on this land. He held out a gloved hand. Decide now. I'm not freezing to death waiting for you to make up your mind. She took his hand. He pulled her close with one arm, lifting her as though she weighed nothing at all, and set her in front of his saddle. Then he swung up behind her, his body a wall of warmth at her back. One arm wrapped around her waist, holding her secure, while the other hand guided the horse into the white chaos. "What is your name?" she asked, her words nearly stolen by the wind. "Colton Walker." "I am Tabitha Kennedy." "Thank you for save it. Talking wastes heat." They rode in silence after that. Though silence was not quite accurate, the blizzard screamed around them, a sound like all the fury of winter given voice. Tabitha could see nothing, absolutely nothing, yet the horse moved with confidence, and the man behind her never hesitated. His arm around her waist was firm, keeping her anchored, and gradually she realized that she could feel his heat seeping through their layers of clothing. A small mercy in the frozen hell they traversed. Time became meaningless. Minutes or hours might have passed. Her consciousness started to drift, the cold making her drowsy, and she heard his voice rough in her ear. "Stay awake, don't you dare fall asleep. I am just so tired. Tell me something, anything. Where are you from?" "Boston. Long way from home." "Why are you out here?" "My father. He runs a trading post at Fort Kearny. My mother died last spring and he wanted me to come help him. I took the train to Omaha, then was supposed to take the stage, but it was not running, so I found that freight wagon." She was rambling, she knew, but it kept her awake. "What about you? Do you live alone?" "Yes." "No wife?" "No. That must be lonely." "It is what it is." She wanted to ask more, but the effort of speaking had exhausted her. She let her head rest against his shoulder, felt his arm tighten around her waist. "Stay with me," he said, and she could not tell if it was a command or a request. Then, miraculously, she saw a shape in the snow, a building, solid and real, emerging from the white void. The horse stopped, and Colton dismounted, pulling her down after him. Her legs buckled, numb and useless, and he caught her, lifting her into his arms and carrying her toward the structure. The door opened onto warmth that felt like heaven after hell. He kicked it shut behind them, cutting off the wind's howl, and set her on her feet near a fireplace where embers still glowed. The room was simple, a main area with a table and chairs, a kitchen area to one side, a door that presumably led to a bedroom. Everything was neat, orderly, the home of a man who lived alone and liked it that way. "Get those wet clothes off," he said, moving to stoke the fire. "There are blankets in the chest by the wall." Tabitha's fingers were too numb to manage buttons. She fumbled with her coat, achieving nothing except frustration. Colton glanced over, assessed the situation, and crossed to her without a word. He pulled off his gloves and went to work on her coat buttons with fingers that moved efficiently despite their own exposure to the cold. "I can manage," she protested weakly. "You cannot." He got her coat off, then her outer dress, leaving her in her undergarments and shivering violently. He retrieved blankets from the chest and wrapped them around her, then guided her to a chair close to the fire, which was now blazing cheerfully. "Stay here, I need to tend to my horse. In the storm, I have a barn. He earned his shelter tonight." He paused at the door, looking back at her with those winter-gray eyes. "Do not do anything stupid while I am gone. Just sit there and get warm." Then he was gone, back into the blizzard, and Tabitha was alone in a stranger's house, wrapped in blankets that smelled of wood smoke and something else, something masculine and not unpleasant. Her body hurt as sensation returned to her extremities, a fierce tingling in her fingers and toes that brought tears to her eyes. But she was alive. Against all odds, she was alive. Colton returned 10 minutes later, covered in snow, which he shook off before removing his coat and hat. For the first time, Tabitha saw him clearly. He was perhaps 27 or 28, with dark hair that fell past his collar and a face that was more interesting than handsome, strong jaw, straight nose, those remarkable gray eyes beneath heavy brows. He moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin, hanging his coat on a peg and moving to the kitchen area. "How are your hands and feet?" he asked, pumping water into a kettle. "They hurt." "Good. Means you will keep them." He set the kettle on the stove and got the fire going beneath it. "I am going to make coffee. You want some, please?" He worked in silence, and Tabitha watched him, trying to reconcile this quiet, methodical man with the figure who had appeared from the blizzard like a dark angel. He moved with economy, no wasted motion, and within a surprisingly short time, he handed her a tin cup filled with coffee so strong she could probably stand a spoon in it. "Thank you," she said, wrapping her hands around the cup's warmth. He nodded, taking a seat across from her with his own cup. The fire crackled between them. Outside, the blizzard raged on, but here, in this small cabin, there was warmth and light and the companionable silence of two people who had survived something together. "The driver," Tabitha said suddenly. "You said he ran. Will he?" "Probably not." "Not in that storm." Colton's voice held no particular emotion. "Stupid way to die, but men do stupid things when they panic. Should we not try to look for him, in a whiteout blizzard? That is how you get 2 dead people instead of 1. He sipped his coffee. "Come morning, if the storm clears, I will ride out and see if there is anything to find. But I am not optimistic." It seemed callous, but Tabitha could not argue with his logic. Going back out into that storm would be suicide. Still, the thought of the driver somewhere out there in the cold made her stomach turn. "You are thinking I am cruel," Colton said, watching her face. "I am thinking you are practical. Out here, that is the same thing sometimes." He stood, moving to a cupboard. "You hungry?" "I probably should be, but I cannot seem to think about food." "You need to eat anyway. Your body needs fuel to stay warm." He pulled out bread and dried meat, setting them on the table. "It is not fancy, but it will keep you going." They ate together, still wrapped in that strange, comfortable silence. Tabitha found herself studying him between bites, the way his hands moved, the line of his profile in the firelight, the sense of competence that radiated from him like heat. He had saved her life. This stranger, this man whose name she had learned only an hour ago, had ridden into a killing storm and brought her to safety without hesitation. "Why did you help me?" she asked. He looked at her, those gray eyes unreadable. "What kind of question is that?" "A reasonable one." "You risked your life riding into that blizzard. You did not know me. You could have simply kept riding to your own safety. And let you freeze to death. Some men would have. Then some men are bastards." He said it simply, as though it were the most obvious thing in the world. "I was riding back from Fort Kearny when the storm hit. Saw your wagon, saw you struggling in the snow. What was I supposed to do? Ride past and pretend I had not seen anything? Many people would. Well, I am not many people. He finished his coffee and stood, collecting their cups. "You should get some sleep. You can have the bed. I will take the floor out here by the fire." "I cannot take your bed. You can and you will. I am not arguing about this." His tone was firm but not unkind. "You have been through hell tonight. You need proper rest. The bed has actual blankets and a mattress. Take it." "Where is it?" He gestured to the door she had noticed earlier. "Through there. I will wake you if anything happens, but mostly you should just sleep and let your body recover." Tabitha wanted to argue more, but exhaustion was pulling at her like a physical weight. She stood, still wrapped in blankets, and moved toward the bedroom door. Then she paused and turned back. "Mr. Walker, Colton. Colton, thank you for everything. You saved my life tonight." Something shifted in his expression, a softening she had not seen before. "Get some rest, Tabitha Kennedy. We will figure out what to do with you come morning." The bedroom was small and simple, a bed with a quilt, a chest of drawers, a washstand. Everything neat and orderly, like the rest of the house. Tabitha shed the damp blankets and climbed under the quilt, which smelled like the rest of his things. Wood smoke and pine and that indefinable masculine scent. The bed was comfortable, far more so than she had expected, and within moments of closing her eyes, she was asleep. She dreamed of snow and darkness and a voice telling her to stay awake, to stay with him. When she woke, pale light was filtering through the single window. The storm's howl had diminished to a sullen moan. She lay still for a moment, orienting herself, remembering where she was and how she had gotten here. Then she climbed out of bed and went to the window. Snow. Nothing but snow as far as she could see. Drifts as high as a man's waist, maybe higher in places, and still more falling from a sky the color of old bones. The world had been erased, every familiar landmark buried under white. She found her dress hanging near the fireplace. Colton must have hung it to dry while she slept. It was still slightly damp but wearable. She dressed quickly, finger combing her hair into some semblance of order, then emerged into the main room. Colton was at the stove, cooking something that smelled wonderful. He glanced over as she entered, and she could have sworn she saw the ghost of a smile cross his face before his expression returned to its usual neutrality. "You are awake. Good. Sit down. Breakfast is almost ready." "How long did I sleep?" 14 hours, give or take." 14, she stared at him. "Why did you not wake me? You needed the rest." He brought plates to the table, eggs and bacon and fried potatoes. "Besides, it is not as though there is anywhere to go. Storm is still going strong." They ate together, and Tabitha marveled at how different this was from the formal breakfasts of her Boston life. No servants, no silver, no polite conversation about nothing at all. Just simple food and a comfortable silence, and the sense that they were two people sheltering from the storm together. "I need to send word to my father," she said. "He will be worried. When the storm clears, I will ride to Fort Kearny and let him know you are safe." Colton pushed back from the table. "Until then, you are stuck here with me. Think you can tolerate that?" "I believe I can manage." "Good." He started clearing the dishes. "Make yourself at home. There are books on the shelf if you want something to read. I need to check on the livestock. I have a few head of cattle in the barn that need tending." "Can I help?" He looked at her with surprise. "You want to help with cattle?" "I want to be useful. You saved my life. The least I can do is assist with chores." He studied her for a moment, those gray eyes thoughtful. "You ever worked with animals before?" "I helped at a farm outside Boston one summer. I know which end of a cow to avoid." That almost smile again. "All right then. Get your coat. Let us see if Boston has prepared you for Nebraska cattle." The barn was attached to the house by a covered walkway, smart planning for winter storms. Inside, it was warmer than outside, heated by the bodies of the animals. 6 cows, Colton's horse, and a goat that regarded Tabitha with yellow-eyed suspicion. "That is Delilah," Colton said, gesturing to the goat. "She is mean as a snake and twice as stubborn, but she gives good milk." Delilah. Fitting name. My sister named her. You have a sister, had. She died 3 years ago, fever. He said it flatly, but Tabitha heard the pain beneath the words. She lived here with me after our parents died. When she passed, I buried her on the hill behind the house where she could see the sunrise. I am sorry. Life out here is hard. People die. You learn to keep going or you die with them. He picked up a pitchfork. Come on. These cows are not going to feed themselves. They worked together, falling into an easy rhythm. Colton showed her what needed doing, and Tabitha followed his lead, mucking stalls and hauling hay and learning that Nebraska cattle were indeed different from Boston farm animals, harder, wilder, less inclined to tolerate foolishness. But she managed, and when they finished, her hands were sore and her back ached, but she felt oddly satisfied. You did good, Colton said as they walked back to the house. Better than I expected, to be honest. Were you testing me? Maybe a little. He held the door for her. Most city women would have fainted at the smell. Most city women have not had my particular education. She brushed hay from her skirt. My mother believed that everyone should know how to work with their hands, regardless of social class. She dragged me to that farm every summer until I was 16. Smart woman. She was. They spent the rest of the day in companionable domesticity. Tabitha read from his small collection of books, while Colton worked on repairing a saddle that had seen better days. The storm continued unabated outside, but inside there was warmth and light and a strange sense of peace that Tabitha had not experienced in a very long time. Tell me about Boston, Colton said suddenly, his hand still working the leather. What is it like? Crowded? Loud? Full of people who think they are terribly important? She set down her book. I loved it once, but after my mother died, it felt hollow somehow. All those social obligations and meaningless conversations, everyone performing their assigned roles. And what was your assigned role? Dutiful daughter. Eligible young woman seeking an appropriate marriage to an appropriate man of appropriate social standing. She heard the bitterness in her own voice. My father wanted me married to his business partner's son, a man who collects butterflies and lectures endlessly about the proper classification of insects. Colton looked up, and this time there was definitely amusement in his eyes. Butterflies. Butterflies. He has 14,000 specimens, all carefully pinned and labeled. He once spent an entire dinner party describing the mating habits of the Atlas moth. She shook her head. When my father wrote asking me to come to Nebraska, I saw my chance to escape. I suspect he thinks it is temporary, that I will help him for a few months and then return to Boston and marry the butterfly collector. But I have no intention of going back. What will you do instead? I have no idea. Is that not exciting? He regarded her with an expression she could not quite read. Most women would be terrified. I am terrified, but I am also free for the first time in my life, and that feels wonderful and terrifying in equal measure. Welcome to the West, Colton said, where everyone is free and terrified and just trying to survive another day. Night fell, and with it came a strange intimacy born of proximity and circumstance. They made dinner together, Colton teaching her how to make pan bread, Tabitha surprising him with her knowledge of herbs and seasonings. They talked about small things and large things, about his life on the ranch and her life in Boston, about the differences between East and West, about dreams and disappointments, and the strange paths that led people to where they were. And through it all, Tabitha found herself increasingly aware of him, the way he moved, the rare sound of his laughter when she said something that amused him, the strength in his hands and the gentleness with which he handled the goat when he brought in fresh milk. He was nothing like the men she had known in Boston, with their soft hands and softer minds. He was hard and capable and utterly real in a way that made her previous life seem like a theatrical performance. The second night, she took the bedroom again despite her protests, and Colton made his bed by the fire. But this time, when she lay in the darkness listening to the storm, she found herself thinking not about the cold or the danger they had survived, but about the man sleeping on the other side of the door. The man who had saved her life and asked nothing in return. The man who spoke little but said much when he did. The man who was beginning to occupy far too much space in her thoughts. The storm finally broke on the third morning. Tabitha woke to silence, not the oppressive silence of the blizzard, but the clean, clear silence of its aftermath. She rushed to the window and saw a world transformed. Snow sparkling under brilliant sunshine, the sky a blue so pure it hurt to look at, everything sharp-edged and crystalline. She dressed quickly and found Colton already up, drinking coffee and staring out the window with an unreadable expression. "It is over," she said. "For now, we will get more before winter ends." He turned to face her. "I am going to ride to Fort Kearny today. Let your father know you are alive. See if anyone found that driver. I could come with you. Better if you stay here. The drifts are deep and it will be slow going. No point in both of us struggling through it." She wanted to argue, but she could see the logic. Instead, she said, "Will you come back?" He looked at her sharply. "Of course I will come back. This is my home." "I meant," she stopped, unsure what she had meant. "Never mind. Please tell my father I am well and that I will come to Fort Kearny as soon as the roads are passable." "I will." He left an hour later, bundled against the cold, his horse picking its way carefully through the snow. Tabitha watched him go from the window, feeling oddly bereft. The cabin seemed too large without him, too quiet, too empty. She busied herself with chores, washing dishes, tidying the already tidy rooms, tending to Delilah and the cows in the barn. But her mind kept returning to Colton, wondering how he was managing, whether he had reached Fort Kearny safely, when he would return. He came back as the sun was setting, his horse steaming in the cold air. Tabitha heard him in the barn and went out to help, taking his horse's reins while he dismounted with a wince. "Are you hurt?" "Just stiff. Long ride." He rolled his shoulders. "Your father is relieved you are alive." "He wanted to come back with me, but I told him to wait until the roads clear a bit more. He agreed, but he is not happy about it." "Did you find the driver?" "We found him. About a mile from where I picked you up. He was frozen solid." Colton's voice was flat. "We buried him in the Fort Kearny cemetery. The pastor said some words. God rest his soul. God should have given him better sense." He led the horse into a stall and began removing the saddle. "Your father wants you to stay here until he can come get you. Says he trusts me to keep you safe." "He said that. He does not even know you." "I know his business partner, a man named Albert Gardner. He vouched for me." Colton hung the saddle on its hook. "So it looks like you are stuck with me a bit longer. Think you can stand it?" She smiled. "I believe I can manage." They fell back into their routine, but something had shifted. Tabitha could not quite name it, but she felt it in the way Colton's eyes lingered on her when he thought she was not looking, in the way her breath caught when their hands accidentally touched reaching for the same plate, in the charged silence that filled the spaces between words. On the fourth day, she was making bread while he repaired a broken chair, and without quite knowing how it happened, she started laughing. It began as a small chuckle at the way the dough was sticking to everything except the bowl, then grew into full, helpless laughter at the absurdity of it all, the bread dough in her hair, the flour coating her dress, the fact that a week ago she had been in Boston attending tedious social functions, and now she was in a Nebraska cabin covered in flour and laughing like a madwoman. Colton looked up from his work, startled. "What is so funny?" "Everything. Nothing. I do not even know any more." She wiped flour from her nose, which only spread it further. "I am a disaster in the kitchen. You are doing fine. I am wearing more flour than the bread dough." He set down his tools and crossed to her, and she saw something in his expression that made her breath catch. He reached out and gently wiped flour from her cheek, his touch surprisingly gentle for such strong hands. "You have been through hell," he said quietly. "Nearly froze to death, lost everything in that wagon, been stuck in a cabin with a stranger for days. And you are laughing about bread dough. That is not disaster, that is strength." "I do not feel strong." "You are, stronger than you know." His hand was still on her cheek, his thumb tracing a line along her jaw. "When I saw you in that storm, I thought you were going to panic, maybe fall apart. But you have not. You have adapted and helped and made this place feel less empty than it has in 3 years." "Colton, I know I should not say these things. You are a guest here, under my protection. It is not appropriate." He dropped his hand but did not step back. "But I am going to say them anyway because life out here is too short to leave important things unsaid. You have brought something back to this cabin that I thought died with my sister. Not just laughter, though God knows I had forgotten what that sounded like, but life, hope, the sense that maybe tomorrow might be better than today." Tabitha's heart was pounding so hard she was certain he could hear it. "I feel it too, this thing between us. I have tried not to, tried to tell myself it is just gratitude or proximity or the strangeness of the situation. But it is not. It is something more. What do we do about it?" "I do not know. I should probably return to my father, help him with the trading post as I promised. You should probably find some nice local woman who knows how to make bread without wearing it." "I do not want some nice local woman." He cupped her face in both hands now, his gray eyes intense. "I want the woman standing in my kitchen covered in flour and laughing at disaster. I want the woman who helped with cattle without complaining and read my sister's books and made this lonely house feel like a home again. We have known each other less than a week. I have known you long enough to know I do not want to let you go." Then he was kissing her, and she was kissing him back, flour and propriety forgotten in the rush of feeling that swept through her. His lips were warm and firm, and he tasted like coffee and possibility. She wrapped her arms around his neck, and he pulled her close, and for a perfect, suspended moment, nothing existed except the two of them and the fire burning between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Colton rested his forehead against hers. "I have been wanting to do that since the second day," he admitted. "Why did you wait so long?" "I was trying to be a gentleman." "Perhaps you could try being less of a gentleman from now on." He laughed a real, genuine laugh that transformed his face and kissed her again. They spent the rest of the day in a haze of discovery, learning each other in small ways and large. Colton taught her how to properly knead bread dough, standing behind her and guiding her hands, his breath warm on her neck. Tabitha braided his hair back from his face, while he protested that he was not a fancy man, then admitted it kept it out of his eyes while working. They talked about everything and nothing, about futures and possibilities, about what it might mean to build a life together in this hard, beautiful land. "My father will have opinions," Tabitha warned. "He is very particular about social standing and appropriate matches. And a rancher who lives in a cabin is not an appropriate match. Not by Boston standards. Good thing we are in Nebraska then." Colton pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her from behind as they stood watching the sunset through the window. "But I understand if this is too fast, too much. You can go to your father, work at the trading post, take time to be sure. I will wait." "How long?" "However long it takes. Days, weeks, months. I have waited 28 years to find someone who makes me feel like you do. I can wait a bit longer." "What if I do not want to wait?" He turned her in his arms, searching her face. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I left Boston to escape a life that did not fit me anymore. I came west looking for something different, something real, and I found it. I found you." She reached up, tracing the line of his jaw. "The blizzard made me your guest, but I do not want to be a guest anymore. I want to be part of your life, part of this place, if you will have me." "If I will have you," he laughed again, that wonderful sound. "Tabitha Kennedy, I will have you any way you will let me. As my wife, if you will agree to it. As my partner in this ranch and this life. As the woman who laughs at disaster and makes flour-covered bread and reads books by firelight. Are you proposing to me?" "I am." "I know it is fast, probably foolish. But out here, you learn to grab hold of good things when you find them because this land has a way of taking away anything you hesitate over. So yes, I am proposing. Marry me, Tabitha. Stay here and help me build something worth having." She should have been terrified. She should have asked for time, for space to think, for all the rational considerations her Boston upbringing insisted were necessary. But standing in his arms with the Nebraska sunset painting the snow gold and crimson, she could not find a single reason to hesitate. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." He kissed her then with a fierce joy that made her dizzy, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around until they were both laughing breathlessly. When he set her down, his eyes were bright with something that might have been tears. "I never thought I would feel this again," he said quietly. "After Margaret died, after I buried my sister on that hill, I thought I was done with loving anything. This land takes so much, and I did not think I had anything left to give. But then a blizzard brought you to my door, and everything changed." "The blizzard made me your guest," Tabitha said softly. "But my laughter, I hope my laughter and my love will make me your wife. It already has." They decided to wait until spring to have a proper wedding, but in the ways that mattered, they were already married. Colton moved Tabitha's few recovered possessions into the bedroom they now shared, and she began transforming the cabin from a place where a man survived into a home where two people lived. She planted herbs in the window boxes Colton built, learned to make decent bread without wearing most of it, and discovered that life on a Nebraska ranch was hard but deeply satisfying work. Tabitha's father arrived when the roads cleared, riding up to the cabin with a mix of relief and apprehension. James Kennedy was a big man with graying hair and a trader's sharp eyes, and he regarded Colton with initial suspicion that melted when he saw how his daughter's face glowed when she looked at the rancher. "So, you are the man who saved my girl," James said, shaking Colton's hand. "I am the man who was lucky enough to find her," Colton replied. They sat around the table, drinking coffee while Tabitha explained what had happened: the blizzard, the rescue, the days spent snowed in together, and finally, their engagement. James listened without interrupting, his weathered face thoughtful. "You are sure about this, Tabby?" he asked when she finished. "You only met a few weeks ago. That is awfully fast." "I am sure, Papa. More sure than I have ever been about anything." "And you, Walker? You understand my daughter comes from a different world than this. She is educated, refined. She is used to certain comforts." "I understand she is strong and brave and capable," Colton said evenly. "I understand she can muck a stall and help birth a calf and laugh when things go wrong. I understand she makes this cabin feel like home. And I understand I love her more than I thought I could love anyone. If that is not enough for you, then I am sorry, but it is enough for me." James studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You will take good care of her." "I will die before I let anything happen to her." "See that you do not die then. She has already lost her mother. She does not need to lose you too." James turned to his daughter. "You are happy, Tabby, happier than I have ever been. Then you have my blessing, both of you." He raised his coffee cup in a toast. "To new beginnings and blizzards that bring unexpected gifts." They toasted together, and Tabitha felt tears prick her eyes. Her father stayed for 3 days, helping with ranch work and getting to know Colton better. By the time he left, the two men had developed a mutual respect that promised to grow into friendship. "Come visit the trading post when you can," James said as he prepared to leave. "Both of you. I would like my future son-in-law to meet the rest of Fort Kearney society." "We will," Colton promised, "soon as calving season is done." James rode away and Tabitha watched him go with mixed emotions. "Do you think he approves?" "I think he sees that you are happy. That is all any father really wants." Colton pulled her close. "Now come on. Delilah is giving me the evil eye. I think she wants her afternoon milking. That goat hates me. She hates everyone. It is her defining characteristic." Winter slowly gave way to early spring, bringing mud and rain and the backbreaking work of calving season. 3 of Colton's cows gave birth, and Tabitha learned the terrifying, exhilarating business of helping deliver new life. She held lanterns in the barn at 3 in the morning, fetched clean water, and once, when a calf was breech, helped Colton turn it so it could be born safely. When the little bull finally slithered into the world, bawling and wet, she sat back in the straw and laughed with relief and exhaustion. "You are covered in blood and birthing fluid," Colton observed. "I am aware." She grinned at him. "Is this what ranch life is always like?" "Pretty much." "Still want to marry me?" "More than ever." They were wed on a bright April morning when the prairie was just beginning to green up, and wildflowers dotted the landscape like scattered jewels. The ceremony took place in Fort Kearney's small church, with James giving Tabitha away and half the town turning out to witness the marriage of the quiet rancher to the Boston woman he had rescued from the blizzard. Tabitha wore a dress her father had ordered from Omaha, simple but elegant, with lace at the collar and cuffs. Colton wore his best suit, looking uncomfortable but determined, his hair neatly trimmed and his boots polished to a shine. The pastor, a jovial man named Reverend Mitchell, smiled at them as they stood before the altar. "We are gathered here today to witness the union of Colton Walker and Tabitha Kennedy in holy matrimony. Now, I understand there is quite a story about how these two met, something about a blizzard." Laughter rippled through the congregation. "That blizzard," Colton said, looking at Tabitha with such love that her breath caught, "brought me the greatest gift of my life. It made Tabitha my guest when I found her freezing in the storm. But it was her laughter, her strength, her joy that made her my wife in every way that matters. Today we are just making it official." "Well said," Reverend Mitchell beamed. "In that case, let us proceed. Do you, Colton Walker, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" "I do," Colton said firmly. "And do you, Tabitha Kennedy, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" "I do," Tabitha said, her voice clear and sure. "Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Colton, you may kiss your bride." He did, and the congregation cheered. The celebration afterward was held at the trading post, with James providing food and drink for everyone who attended. There was music and dancing and endless toasts to the happy couple. Tabitha danced with her new husband, then with her father, then with half the men in Fort Kearney, until her feet hurt and her face ached from smiling. As evening fell and the party showed no signs of slowing, Colton caught her hand and pulled her outside into the cool spring air. "Had enough celebration?" he asked. "I am very happy, but yes, I think I have." She leaned against him. "Take me home, husband." "As you wish, wife." They said their goodbyes and rode back to the ranch under a sky full of stars, arriving home as the moon rose over the prairie. Colton lifted Tabitha from her horse and carried her over the threshold, setting her down gently in the cabin that was now truly their home. "This is not Boston," he said softly. "There will be no servants, no fancy parties, no social standing, just hard work and long winters and a life that will test you every day." "I know." She pulled him close. "And I would not trade it for anything. You gave me something I never had in Boston, a real life, a real purpose and real love. The blizzard made me your guest, but my heart made me your wife." He kissed her then, deep and slow, and they spent their wedding night discovering each other with the tender passion of two people who had found something rare and precious in an unexpected place. Life on the ranch settled into a rhythm. Tabitha learned to manage the household with competence, her Boston education proving surprisingly useful in keeping accounts and managing supplies. She also proved to have a gift for working with the animals, developing a particular fondness for the cattle despite their stubborn natures. Even Delilah, the goat, grudgingly accepted her, though acceptance in Delilah's case mostly meant not trying to headbutt her quite as often. Summer brought its own challenges: drought that parched the land and made water precious, heat that turned the cabin into an oven, and once, a prairie fire that threatened everything until Colton and several neighbors managed to create a firebreak that stopped its advance. Tabitha worked alongside the men, digging trenches until her hands blistered and her back screamed in protest. And when the fire finally burned itself out against their defenses, she collapsed in the dirt beside her husband, both of them black with soot and exhausted beyond measure. "We did it," she gasped. "We did." He turned his head to look at her. "You are amazing, you know that. I am a mess. A beautiful mess." He pulled her close despite their collective filth. "I love you, Tabitha Walker. I love you too." In August, Tabitha discovered she was pregnant. She told Colton one evening after dinner, simply and directly, and watched as joy transformed his face. "A baby," he said, as though he could not quite believe it. "A baby. Due in late winter or early spring, I think." He swept her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe, and when he pulled back, his eyes were wet. "Margaret always wanted children. She would have loved to be an aunt. Then we will tell our child about her. About the aunt who loved sunrises and named goats Delilah and made her brother's house a home before I ever arrived. Thank you," he whispered, "for everything, for being here, for loving me, for giving me a future I never thought I would have." The pregnancy was not easy. Morning sickness plagued Tabitha for weeks, and as fall turned to winter, she grew increasingly uncomfortable, her small frame struggling to accommodate their growing child. But Colton was attentive and patient, taking over the heavier chores without complaint and sitting up with her on nights when sleep would not come. In December, a year after the blizzard that had brought them together, another storm rolled in. Tabitha watched it approach with trepidation, one hand on her swollen belly. "I hope our baby does not decide to arrive during a blizzard," she said. "If it does, we will manage." Colton wrapped his arms around her from behind, his hands covering hers on her belly. "We have survived worse." The baby, as though hearing and heeding her mother's request, waited until a clear February morning to make an appearance. Tabitha's labor began just after dawn, and Colton rode to Fort Kearny to fetch the midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Porter who had delivered half the babies in the territory. Labor was long and hard, testing Tabitha's strength to its limits. But Colton stayed by her side, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, telling her she was strong, she could do this. He loved her. And finally, as the sun began to set, their son was born, a healthy, red-faced baby boy with a full head of dark hair and lungs that worked perfectly, as his immediate cries attested. "A boy," Mrs. Porter announced, placing the cleaned and wrapped baby in Tabitha's arms. "A fine, strong boy." Tabitha looked down at her son, feeling love so fierce it was almost painful. His tiny hand gripped her finger with surprising strength, and his eyes, when they briefly opened, were gray like his father's. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "Welcome to the world." Colton sat beside them on the bed, one arm around Tabitha, one finger gently stroking his son's cheek. "He is perfect. What shall we name him?" "I was thinking Thomas, if you like it, after my father. Thomas Walker." Tabitha tested the name. "Yes, I like that very much." "Thomas James Walker," Colton amended. "For both our fathers, perfect." They sat together, the three of them, as the light faded outside and the first stars appeared. Mrs. Porter bustled around, cleaning up and making Tabitha comfortable, then declared she would stay the night to make sure mother and baby were both well before returning to Fort Kearny in the morning. "You did well, Mrs. Walker," the midwife said approvingly. "That was not an easy labor, but you got through it with courage and strength. Your boy is lucky to have you for a mother." "I am lucky to have him," Tabitha replied softly. That night, with Thomas sleeping in a cradle Colton had built weeks earlier and Tabitha exhausted but glowing with happiness, Colton lay beside his wife and marveled at how completely his life had changed in just over a year. "You remember what I said on our wedding day?" Tabitha asked drowsily. "About the blizzard making me your guest, and your laughter making you my wife. I remember. I think I need to amend that." She smiled up at him. "The blizzard made me your guest, my laughter made me your wife, and our love made us a family. I like that amendment." He kissed her forehead. "Get some sleep. You have earned it. Stay with me, always." Thomas proved to be a relatively easy baby, though his arrival meant even less sleep and more work for both parents. Colton adapted to fatherhood with the same quiet competence he brought to everything, changing nappies without complaint and walking the floor with his son during fussy nights. Tabitha discovered that she loved being a mother, even though it was exhausting and messy and nothing like the genteel motherhood she had observed among Boston society ladies. Spring came again, bringing green grass and new calves and the endless work of maintaining the ranch. James visited frequently, doting on his grandson and helping with repairs around the property. He and Colton had developed a genuine friendship, spending evenings playing cards and discussing business while Tabitha nursed Thomas and pretended not to be amused by their increasingly competitive card games. "Your father cheats," Colton informed her one evening after James had left. "He does not. He absolutely does. I just cannot figure out how. Perhaps you are simply not as good at cards as you think you are. I am excellent at cards. Your father is just better at cheating." She laughed and he grinned at her, and Thomas gurgled happily from his cradle. And Tabitha thought about how this moment, this simple, perfect moment, was everything she had never known she wanted. As Thomas grew, the ranch prospered. Colton's careful management and Tabitha's business sense proved a formidable combination, and they slowly expanded their herd and improved the property. They built an addition onto the cabin, creating a second bedroom for Thomas and space for the larger family they both hoped to have someday. "Do you miss Boston?" Colton asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Thomas sleeping peacefully in Tabitha's arms. "Not even a little bit," she replied honestly. "Sometimes I miss my mother and I wonder what she would think of all this. But Boston itself, the life I had there, no, this is where I belong. with a rancher and a goat named Delilah and more work than any sane person would choose, with the man I love and the life we built together and the family we are creating. Yes, exactly this. He reached over and took her hand, their fingers intertwining with the easy familiarity of long practice. The blizzard that brought you to me was the luckiest day of my life. Mine, too. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold, and Thomas stirred in his sleep, making the small, contented sounds of a happy baby. Somewhere in the barn, Delilah bleated her evening complaint about something or nothing. The prairie stretched endlessly around them, beautiful and harsh and full of possibility. 2 years after Thomas was born, Tabitha gave birth to twin girls Emma and Grace, who looked like their mother and had their father's gray eyes. The cabin was suddenly full of noise and chaos and joy. Colton built a larger table to accommodate their growing family and spent his evenings being climbed on by 3 small humans who adored him completely. How did this happen? He asked one particularly hectic evening, holding a twin in each arm while Thomas tugged at his leg, demanding attention. Well, when a man and a woman love each other very much. I know how it happened. I meant how did I get so lucky, the blizzard, Tabitha reminded him, and my laughter. Best blizzard of my life. The children grew healthy and strong, learning to navigate ranch life with the adaptability of young things. Thomas, at 3, was already helping his father with simple chores, mimicking everything Colton did with intense seriousness. The twins followed their mother everywhere, their small hands helping with cooking and cleaning in ways that usually created more work than they solved. James visited at least once a month, his trading post doing well enough that he could afford to take time away. He was a devoted grandfather, bringing small gifts for the children and tall tales about his trading adventures. On his 5th birthday, Thomas received a pony from his grandfather, a gentle mare named Buttercup, who tolerated the boy's enthusiastic, if inexpert handling with patient grace. "Papa, you spoil them," Tabitha protested. "That is what grandfathers are for," James replied, watching Thomas attempt to mount Buttercup with more enthusiasm than skill. "Besides, a boy needs a horse. How else will he learn to ride? He is 5. I was riding at 4. "That explains so much about you." James laughed and pulled his daughter into a hug. "You are happy, Tabby. That is all I ever wanted for you. Well, that and grandchildren which you have provided in abundance. Just 3, so far, Papa." But he was right. 2 years later, Tabitha gave birth to another son, Samuel, who arrived during a thunderstorm and emerged into the world with a lusty cry that suggested he would never be quiet about anything. The cabin was bursting at the seams now, and Colton began planning a larger house, a proper ranch house with enough bedrooms for their growing family and space for everyone to breathe. They broke ground in the spring, and the whole community came together to help with the construction. It was the way of the West, neighbors helping neighbors, everyone contributing what they could, because survival often depended on cooperation. The new house rose quickly under so many hands, a 2-story structure with 4 bedrooms upstairs and a large kitchen and living area downstairs. "It is beautiful," Tabitha said, standing in the empty house before they moved their belongings in. "It is home," Colton corrected. "A bigger home than I ever thought I would need or have. You did this. You and your laughter and your love. You turned a lonely rancher into a husband and father with a house full of family. We did this together. We did." He pulled her close, and she rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I love you, Tabitha Walker. Every day I love you more than the day before. I love you too. Always." The years passed in a blur of work and joy and the controlled chaos that came with raising 4 children on a ranch. Thomas grew into a serious boy who followed his father everywhere, learning the business of ranching with dedicated focus. The twins were wild and adventurous, constantly getting into trouble and then charming their way out of it with gap-toothed grins. Samuel was the baby, sweet-natured and gentle, who cried when animals were hurt and insisted on trying to keep a wounded bird as a pet until it healed enough to fly away. The ranch prospered, growing from Colton's modest beginning into one of the more successful operations in the region. They hired hands to help with the work, young men who lived in the bunkhouse Colton built behind the main house and who treated Tabitha with respectful devotion, and the children with patient tolerance. James Kennedy passed away peacefully in his sleep when Thomas was 10. They buried him in the Fort Kearny Cemetery beside Tabitha's mother, whose body they had moved west at James's request years earlier. At the funeral, Tabitha stood between her husband and her eldest son, watching as they lowered her father into the Nebraska earth, and felt a complex mix of grief and gratitude. Grief for the loss, but gratitude that he had lived to see her happy, to know his grandchildren, to understand that his decision to bring her west had given her the life she was meant to have. "He was a good man," Colton said quietly as they walked away from the grave. "He was. And he loved you like a son." The feeling was mutual. They inherited the trading post, which they leased to a capable manager while maintaining ownership. The additional income allowed them to expand the ranch further and provide for their children's education. A schoolteacher came to Fort Kearny, establishing a small school, and all 4 children attended, learning reading and writing and arithmetic alongside ranching and farming skills. On a cold December evening, 15 years after the blizzard that had brought them together, Colton and Tabitha sat on the porch of their ranch house watching the snow fall. The children were inside Thomas, now 15 and nearly as tall as his father, helping the twins with their homework, while Samuel played with wooden animals Colton had carved for him. "You remember that first blizzard?" Tabitha asked, wrapped in a heavy blanket with Colton's arm around her shoulders. "How could I forget? I was riding back from Fort Kearny, trying to beat the storm home, and I saw this wagon stuck in the snow and a woman struggling in the drifts. I thought she was going to die if I did not help her. I thought I was going to die regardless. Then you appeared like something from a story, all dark and dangerous and heroic. I was not heroic. I was cold and annoyed that someone had been foolish enough to be caught in that storm. But you helped me anyway. Of course I did. What kind of man would I be if I had ridden past?" He pulled her closer. "Best decision I ever made, stopping for that foolish Boston woman in the snow." "I was not foolish. I was unlucky. You were lucky. You met me." She elbowed him gently. "Your humility is overwhelming." "It is one of my best qualities." He kissed the top of her head. "Do you ever regret it? Staying here with me instead of going back to Boston, trading society parties for mucking stalls and endless work?" "Never. Not once. Not even on the hardest days." She turned to look at him, this man who had saved her life and then given her a reason to live it fully. Gray threaded his dark hair now, and lines creased the corners of his eyes, but he was still the same man who had appeared from a blizzard and offered her his hand. "You gave me everything I never knew I wanted: a real home, real work, real love, real family. The blizzard made me your guest that first night, but my laughter and my love, and all the years we have built together, those made me your wife, your partner, your everything. And you are my everything." His voice was rough with emotion. "That blizzard was harsh and nearly killed you, but it also brought you to me, and I thank God for it every single day." Inside, they heard Thomas laugh at something Samuel said, Then the twins joined in, their voices bright with joy. The sound drifted out through the window, mingling with the whisper of falling snow. "Listen to that," Tabitha said softly. "Our family, our children, our life. That is the sound of happiness, Colton. That is what we built from a blizzard and laughter and love." "It is," he agreed. "And I would not change a single moment of it." They sat together as the snow fell and the stars emerged, watching their ranch, their home, their life settle into peaceful evening. The prairie stretched endlessly around them, no longer harsh and forbidding but familiar and beloved. This land had tested them, challenged them, demanded everything they had to give. But it had also given them each other, and that made every hardship worthwhile. Inside, the children's laughter rose again, and Colton smiled. "Should we go in? It is getting cold out here." "In a moment. I want to remember this, the snow, the quiet, you and me together. 15 years since that first blizzard, and I love you more now than I did then, which I did not think was possible." "I know what you mean. Every year, every day, you surprise me and challenge me and make me better than I was before. You took a lonely, bitter rancher and taught him how to live again, how to love again, how to believe in tomorrow again." "We taught each other," Tabitha corrected. "That is what partnerships are, two people making each other stronger. Then I am grateful every day for our partnership." He stood, pulling her up with him. "Come on, wife. Let us go inside and enjoy our family. We have earned this happiness, you and I." They went inside together, into the warmth and light and noise of their home. Thomas looked up from where he was helping Emma with mathematics and smiled. Grace was reading by the fire, and Samuel was building an elaborate structure with his wooden animals. Everything was imperfect and chaotic and absolutely perfect. "Mama, Papa," Samuel called. "Look what I built. It is our ranch with all the animals and everything." They went to admire his creation, genuinely impressed by his attention to detail. He had carved paths through his imaginary snow, created a barn from blocks, and arranged the animals with careful precision. "That is wonderful, Samuel," Tabitha said, ruffling his hair. "Tell the story again, Mama, about the blizzard that brought you here." "You have heard that story 100 times. I want to hear it again." Colton caught Tabitha's eye and smiled. "Tell them. I never get tired of hearing it either." So Tabitha settled into her chair with Samuel on her lap, and the other children gathered around, and she told the story once more about the blizzard that had nearly killed her, about the dark stranger who had appeared from the storm like a miracle, about the days spent in a small cabin learning to love and be loved. She told it with humor and warmth, emphasizing the funny parts and glossing over the truly dangerous moments because her children did not need to know how close she had come to dying that night. "And then your father asked me to marry him, right there in this very house, well, the cabin that stood where this house stands now covered in flour, because I was trying to make bread and failing spectacularly." "And you said yes immediately?" Emma asked. "I did. Because I knew even then that he was the man I was meant to find, and that this land was where I was meant to be." "Because the blizzard made you his guest," Grace recited, "and your laughter made you his wife." "Exactly right." Tabitha smiled at her daughter. "The blizzard was terrible and dangerous, but it brought me to your father, and that made everything worthwhile." "That is romantic," Emma sighed. "That is cold and terrifying," Thomas corrected, "but also romantic, I guess." They all laughed, and Colton added more wood to the fire, and outside the snow continued to fall on the ranch they had built together. It was not the life Tabitha had imagined for herself growing up in Boston, surrounded by society and privilege and carefully maintained propriety. But it was the life she had chosen, and it was better than anything she could have imagined. The years continued to roll past like the season's spring planting and summer heat, fall harvest, and winter cold. The children grew and changed, Thomas eventually taking over more of the ranch management as Colton's back started protesting the hardest labor. The twins went to school in Omaha for a year, then returned declaring that city life was not for them and they wanted to stay on the ranch forever. Samuel discovered a gift for working with horses, training them with patience and skill that left even experienced hands shaking their heads in admiration. More grandchildren came as the children married and started families of their own. Thomas wed the schoolteacher's daughter, a smart, capable woman named Alice who fit seamlessly into the family. The twins both married local ranchers' sons in a double wedding that was the talk of Fort Kearny for years. Samuel married late, bringing home a widow with 2 children of her own who became part of the extended family without question. Colton and Tabitha's ranch house filled with the noise and chaos of grandchildren during holidays and special occasions, and they loved every chaotic minute of it. They grew older together, their hair graying, their bodies slowing, but their love as strong as ever. They still sat on the porch on winter evenings, still held hands when they thought no one was looking, still laughed together at private jokes that needed no explanation after so many years. On their 30th anniversary, the whole family gathered for a celebration. 3 generations filled the ranch house and spilled out into the yard, children and grandchildren, in-laws and friends, all come together to celebrate the marriage that had started with a blizzard and grown into a dynasty. Thomas stood to give a toast, his own children clustered around him. To my parents who taught us all what love looks like. My father tells the story sometimes of how he found my mother in a blizzard, more dead than alive, and brought her here to save her life. But the truth is, they saved each other. He gave her shelter from the storm. She gave him a reason to come in from the cold. Together, they built this family, this ranch, this legacy that we all carry forward. To Colton and Tabitha Walker, may we all be as lucky in love as you have been. Everyone drank to the toast, and Tabitha felt tears prick her eyes. Colton squeezed her hand under the table, and she squeezed back, overwhelmed by gratitude for this life they had built from nothing but determination and love. Later, when the party had wound down and most of the family had departed for their own homes, Colton and Tabitha walked out to the hill behind the house where his sister Margaret was buried. Over the years, they had added a small garden around her grave, planting flowers that bloomed from spring through fall, keeping the space beautiful and cared for. "You think she would approve?" Tabitha asked, looking at Margaret's headstone. "Of what we have built here?" "I think she would be amazed," Colton replied, "and probably insufferably smug that she was right about me needing someone to take care of me. You never needed taking care of. You managed fine on your own. I survived on my own. I did not start living until you arrived." He put his arm around her shoulders. "That blizzard was the worst storm I had ever seen, and it brought me the greatest gift of my life. Strange how that works. Not strange, meant to be." She leaned against him, comfortable and content. "We were meant to find each other, you and I." The blizzard was just the universe's way of making sure we did not miss our chance. They stood together on the hill as the sun set, painting the Nebraska sky in shades of fire and gold. Below them, the ranch spread out like a kingdom, the house with smoke rising from its chimneys, the barn where animals settled for the night, the pastures where cattle grazed peacefully, the bunkhouse where ranch hands played cards and told stories. Everything they had built, everything they had created, spreading out before them like a promise kept. "You remember what you said on our wedding day?" Colton asked. "About the blizzard and laughter and family." "I said the blizzard made me your guest, my laughter made me your wife, and our love made us a family." "It did. It really did." He turned to face her, cupping her weathered face in his equally weathered hands. "You are still the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. The woman who laughed at disaster and loved me through 30 years of hardship and joy. I would weather 1,000 blizzards if each one brought me back to you." "Just one was enough," she replied, smiling through happy tears. "One blizzard, one rescue, one chance meeting that changed everything. That is all we needed." "That is all we needed," he agreed, and kissed her as the sun set on another day in their long, beautiful life together. They walked back to the house hand in hand, following a path worn smooth by 30 years of footsteps. Inside, their grandchildren were being read bedtime stories by their parents, the next generation learning about love and family and the importance of laughter even in hard times. The cycle continued, as it always would, each generation building on what came before. That night, lying in bed with Tabitha curled against his side, Colton thought about all the paths his life might have taken. He could have ridden past that wagon in the blizzard, focused only on his own survival. He could have brought Tabitha to safety and never seen her again. He could have held back his heart, afraid to risk loving someone in a land that took so much away. But he had not done any of those things. He had stopped. He had rescued her. He had fallen in love with her laughter and her strength and her determination to build a life in this hard land. And in doing so, he had found his own salvation. "What are you thinking about?" Tabitha murmured sleepily. "That blizzard, and how grateful I am for every moment since." "Me too." She snuggled closer. "Go to sleep, my love. Tomorrow is another day of work and family, and everything we have built together." "Best kind of day there is," he replied, and closed his eyes, content in the knowledge that he was exactly where he belonged, with exactly who he belonged with, living exactly the life he was meant to live. The blizzard had made her his guest. Her laughter had made her his wife. But time and love and determination had made them something more: partners, friends, lovers, parents, grandparents, the foundation of a family that would endure long after they were gone. That was the true miracle, the real gift: not just survival, but thriving. Not just existing, but living fully and loving completely and building something that mattered. Outside, snow began to fall again, gentle and beautiful now, nothing like the killing storm that had brought them together so many years ago. It dusted the ranch with white, covering everything in a blanket of peace. And in the house on the hill, surrounded by family and love and 3 decades of shared memories, Colton and Tabitha Walker slept peacefully, their hands intertwined even in dreams, their story complete, but their love eternal, a testament to the power of hope, laughter, and love in even the harshest landscape. The end.